Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're going to be making a video on using freehand filing and file guides. And you'd be thinking, not another file sharpening video. Well, you'd be correct. I'm making one because I've never done one using the file guide on its own. So we're going to go over a few things there. Now this would be great for the beginners. It's certainly not for the experienced people, because they know what they're doing. So one of the other things that when you put this into the tooth, one side of the file guide sits on the top of the tooth and the other side sits on the raker. So that's how you hold it, and we'll demonstrate that. Also remember that file guides are chain specific, so there's all different ones. You've got 1/4 inch, 3/8 low profile, 0.325, 3/8 standard, and 404. So you've got the 5 of them first. So they're chain specific. Make sure you're using the right one. Normally you only have to do 2 or 3 strokes, and that should bring the chain back up, provided the chain wasn't damaged. Now we've got the chain that we're going to file is a standard 3/8 steel RM semi chisel chain. So we're using 5.2 millimeter file, and you'll see that's written on there. 5.2 millimeter, 13/64 3/8, and there's the part number for that one there. And you'll see the 30-degree angle on there, because all the steel chains, the top plate angle is designed to be at 30 degrees. Now, I've got 2 files here because I've got a 5.2, which is 13/64, and I've got a 5.5 millimeter file, which is 7/32. Now, personally, I prefer, and a lot of other chainsaw companies will advise this as well, is that I'm going to change the file out from the 5.2 and put the 5.5 millimeter file. So that's our 5.5 there. 5.5. Reason I'm doing that is a lot of the chain manufacturers, as I said earlier, recommend using a 5.5 millimeter file when the chain is brand new. Now, what difference does that make, you say? Well, the main reason is that you've got the taper, so it's higher here and it tapers down lower. So using a 5.5 millimeter file, we get right down to the bottom, right down to the bottom of the gullet, and we get the file. The file should sit between 20 and 25% above the tooth. So on a brand new tooth, a 5.5 millimeter file certainly does the job really well. And by the time you get down about halfway, swap over to the 5.2 millimeter, because it's getting shorter here, and you don't want to be using a 5.5 millimeter file down the back. So that's quite normal to use a 5.5 millimeter file on a brand new chain and swap over to a 5.2 millimeter file when you're halfway down, and you'll still get that beautiful nice C shape. And the whole idea of the file, if it sits correctly at this point here, this is what we refer to the top plate cutting angle. So we've got a beveled edge on there. So this is a compounded beveled edge, because you've got 30 degrees here, and you should have 60 degrees on that face of the tooth. So right up at the top here on this cutting corner, the first millimeter or so, should be a 60-degree angle coming in like that. So the radius of the file sitting right up here should be about a 60-degree angle. And that's where the 60-degree top plate cutting angle comes from the radius of the file sitting at the correct height above the tooth, which is about 20 to 25%. A lot of companies recommend 25%. Still even recommended 10% at one stage. Now they're saying 25%. So, yeah, it's an interesting subject, that one. But you can't go wrong at 20% or 25%. It's going to give you a nice cutting top plate angle. So what we'll do next is go over to the filing vise, and we'll set up that, and we'll go through some of the procedures. Okay, so I've got this all set up, and as you can probably see on the bottom, there's a weight there. It weighs about 2.5 kilo, because it's nice to keep a bit of tension on the chain. Even though I've got these locking systems, they really don't work as good as what you may think they do. So because this chain's not very old, I decided to put a 5.5mm file into the file guide. Now, when you put this file guide on and place it on the tooth, you'll notice it's got 30-degree markings on it there. So we'll turn it up the right way. There's your 30-degree markings left and right. So the whole idea is that when you place it on here, and we'll zoom in, hopefully you can see this pretty good, that you can see the line that's on here, and you line that up parallel with the bar, and you should only, if the chain is just slightly blunt, about 2 or 3 passes. So just have it sitting on the tooth and just touching the raker. So just balance it on there and a couple of strokes. Then the next one. So it's just a matter of moving that around until the next tooth, and make sure that you sit that on the raker and the tooth, held at the right angle. Make sure it's comfortable, and just a couple of strokes. It's really that easy. They really do work good, the file guides. It takes a lot of the errors out, and make sure that occasionally when I do the other side, so this is a left-handed tooth. When I do a right-handed tooth, I'm going to rotate the file so that the file isn't always in the same place. So that's not a bad idea as well, that you rotate the file. Now normally a file, you'd be lucky, I don't know, get a couple thousand strokes out of it at best, and then the file drops off a little bit. Right, so just do another couple of teeth here. Now, the other thing is, if you don't have one of these vise, look, I don't expect you to have a vise like this, but you can put your chainsaw bar in a vise, and you can do it that way. If you don't have a vise, then you can buy what they call a chainsaw bar stump, and it's just like a little bit of a G-type clamp, and you place that on the bar and you could work on a workbench. So you may want to consider those options, which one will suit you. Now, one thing about hand filing is that you can find out that one hand, like I'm doing the left hand tooth here, and I'm almost coming up to the my mark, so there's the red mark there, and that's where I started. And then I've got to do the right hand tooth. I can actually feel that. One thing about your finger has a lot of nerve endings. And just by touching the tooth very lightly, you should be able to feel that sharpness. Just run your finger over it. I can tell that's razor sharp. Now, there's 2 ways to sharpen the other side. If you want to sharpen the other side, you can swap hands and come from that way, or you may feel that it's more comfortable to go the other way. So I feel it's probably easier to go this way now. So what I'll do now is that was our red mark. So I can proceed to file this side. So what I'll do is swap the camera around the other side and proceed to file. Now, I'm using the left hand to file this now. So this is another thing. You've got to make sure that if you are doing that, you've got to make sure that you're doing this correctly, applying the same amount of pressure, and the left side is filed the same as the right side. Now, the other thing that I do in my hand filing is that I'm giving this roughly about the same amount of filings, about 3. And what I will do after I finish filing, I will check the individual teeth, a bit of a visual on them, and I'll take a permanent marker, and if I feel that there's a tooth that needs more filing, I'll just mark that. I don't want to spend filing and inspection at the same time. So I would sort of much prefer to give the teeth about 3 swipes. So, yeah, only doing about 1, 2, 3 or 4. You can just put your finger over the top, and as I said, you'll be surprised how many nerve endings that are in your finger and how easy it is to feel. Once you're trained, you feel how sharp the chain is just from those nerve endings. I might as well finish this chain. I've only got a couple more links to go and it's finished. I might have a bit of a look at it. One thing that I notice is that I like to make sure that my chains are always razor sharp, and that also means that that's finished. Always make sure that when I'm using my chainsaw that I don't dull the chain that bad that it really takes a lot of filing. It didn't take long to do that. Really doesn't take that long, maybe less than 10 minutes. Well, there it is. The video's been going for 9 minutes, so it's less than that. So if we have a look, that's pretty good. There's the C shape in there. Okay, so that come up all right. Now, what I want to do is draw your attention to is, before we're talking about using the file guide and mounting the chainsaw in the vise, and if you don't have a vise, you can get a vise stump that fits here and you can sit it on the workbench and do it that way. But what I would do is like to draw your attention to the file guide has another friend. It's it's a little cradle. And if you look underneath, it'll say 3/8. So, and there's a part number underneath there. Now, this fits over the chain, the left and the right chain. And what the whole idea is that it fits over at a 30-degree angle like that. And we'll zoom in so that you can see it. And you can see that I've marked a bit of red texture on there because, again, one of the mistakes that you can make is the whole idea of the cradle is so that you're keeping it at that 30 degrees without making a mistake. See who's got that 30-degree mark on it? So that 30-degree mark, the cradle ensures that it's at 30 degrees. But the mistake that you can make is filing down on an angle. So you have to be a little bit careful that you're filing straight, not down like that. It's so easy to make that mistake. So in that situation, what I like to do is file about halfway down the saw like that. So if we put the camera this way, like that. And what I like to do is stand in front. So if I've got that sitting like that, I'm standing that way about a foot. And by standing about a foot in front, I've got really good view that I'm not, where that red texture mark is there, that I'm not down on an angle. So it's pretty easy. And I'll just lock the chain brake on too. Sometimes it pays to lock the chain brake. So that's that one. As I said, it's very, very easy to make a mistake. Once you get used to using one of these, you'll do it very quick and fast, and you'll really be surprised how good you'll get at it. Now, while I'm trying to keep that as perfectly flat and horizontal as possible, it's quite easy to make a little mistake and tilt that. Now, I'm about 6 inches away from that. So I've got clear view here that I can make sure that I'm not tilting it. And I'll show you why, because it's like everything else. Sometimes things don't go to plan. Now, this cradle moves, so the whole idea that when you place it on top like that and you place it into the tooth, you push it that way. So you push it that way so that it pushes into the tooth. Now, for those that have never used one of these, there's a little slot. Let's call it a window. And I think if I keep it on the white, if I keep it on the background, you can see through there. There it is there. So you can see the tooth. When you place it on top like that and you look down, you can see the tooth. But this just stops it, keeps it fairly spot on. And as I say, the biggest mistake you can make is tilting it. When you do the other side, flip the chainsaw around in the vise and you just turn it the other way. Yeah, so they're pretty straightforward. Now, back to the file, because we didn't talk much about the traditional file. The traditional file, you've got two ways of filing. You can stand this side or you can stand that side. Depends whether, if you stand this side and you look that way, you can look into the tooth. And you can really see the file good in that position. And you just got to make sure that you're keeping the file horizontal. And probably the hardest thing to do is trying to keep the file up. Now, a lot of the times, and you may be watching, a lot of times when you file a tooth, the tooth moves, it rocks back a little bit. You can tighten the chain, but it doesn't make a huge deal of difference, because if it rocks back, I'm still pushing the file into it. You'll get used to that. And just to briefly recap again, is that if you do use this file guide, it's great to check after you've done about 3 or 4 chains that you've sharpened up. And then you might want to use this just to run through 1 or 2 teeth, just to make sure that you're still within the specifications of a brand new chain, the right angle and everything else. And also at the side plate, that you don't have too much hook. What can happen is pretty good when you've got a brand new chain, but after you've filed a few times, you can find out that the filing angle can change and the side plate can change, because you're not really good at it. And that's why it's good, even if you get one of these, the cradle, and once your skills have come up really good, you can get rid of the cradle, and then you can just use the file guide. And then once your skills are really good, you can get rid of the cradle and you can go back to using the file. And then all as you'll do is make sure every now and then, grab the file guide, run it over and see how good it is. If you can stay on track, you don't need the cradle. But if you're going off track every now and then, put the cradle on, redress the whole chain left and right, and then don't worry about it for about another 5 or 6 times, and then maybe check. It depends on how good you are. And that's what it comes down to, how good you are at filing. Anyway, that's probably it. Not much more else to say. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.